Hello, Watch Forest Focus as the dust settles on what was a great season for Nottingham Forest, but football certainly doesn't stand still, as thoughts already turn to next season and what might happen on the Reds roller coaster. So joining me to discuss all that, it's great to welcome back one of the most respected journalists in the game, the Daily Telegraph's Midlands football writer, John Percy. John, how are you doing today?
Mateus, how are you? I'm very good, thank you. End of a long season, but the work never stops, does it?
It doesn't for you. Well, it doesn't for me either. No, it can't. It can't stop because I worry that people just stop listening and never come back. So no, we plow on relentlessly. How are you?
Yeah, very well, very well. Sunday was obviously absolutely exhausting. You know, if you're there as a reporter or as a fan, it was the roller coaster of emotions, wasn't it?
Yeah, we'll pick up on that. I should say just quickly, obviously, mention awful events in Liverpool yesterday as we record. So thoughts with people there, just horrible stuff to see. Let's talk football then. That's why we're here. Yeah, Sunday was so strange. I mean, I was in the stands as a fan, which I do prefer to being a journalist. And it was weird, just sat there quietly, waiting for the players to come back. So I wanted to show appreciation for them, but it was a really strange mood around the ground. You're slightly more detached in the press box. What did you make of it all?
Absolutely the same as that. I mean, it was before the game, you're thinking it's got to be a day of celebration. You know, what they've done from the last two seasons, for that progress, that's incredible. But, you know, there is going to be that nagging feeling that they have thrown it away, I guess, is the really harsh way of saying it. It was in their hands. For weeks, everyone's been saying the results have gone against them. You know, they went for them on the Sunday and they just had to take care of their own business. But they couldn't get it done. But it's just been, they've just ran out of steam, haven't they? But it's just been an absolutely incredible season. And when the dust settles as it has now, we can look at it. You're going to have to adjust your graphics pre-match for the Conference League star next season, aren't you? So that's the way you've got to look at it. It's just got to be confident. And I'm just, you know, this will be a long answer. I just look at it and think 7th from the two seasons. I mean, last season, let's be honest, it was absolutely excruciating. It was just horrible. Nuno looked like he'd, you know, hadn't slept for weeks. You know, it was just a horrible season. And then you're looking at the likes of Thomas Frank at Brentford. You know, he said after his game on Sunday to finish 10th for a club of our size is brilliant. Now, I would assume that we've got more finance than them, but we've looked at Brentford and Brighton as the sort of benchmark, haven't we, in recruitment and everything. We've got to follow them. We finished above them. And one particular thing that's really frustrated me as a Midlands reporter more than anything is the, without wanting any beef with Ipswich Town, is Ipswich Town spent over 120 million. They lost 10 of the last 13 games. They've gone down, you know, without a whimper. Imagine if that had been Forest in the first season. Buying all those players, they would have been there in columns all over the, you know, all over probably my paper as well, saying Ipswich, you know, they've, you know, spent all this money, it's gone wrong. You know, Forest have, you know, gone mad with the recruitment sort of thing. Ipswich seem to have had a really easy ride. And I know it's obviously they're a great club and, you know, they've got to stabilise somewhere. But it's just, I just find with Forest, particularly, the focus always seems more negative. And Ipswich obviously spent all that money, not much less than Forest in that first season. And they've not really had much of that scrutiny. So I just think the season overall has to be viewed as a success. But the last 10 games, I think the first alarm bells were probably Bournemouth, weren't they? Even though they followed it with the Brighton game. But it's just been a brilliant achievement by the players, and I think that has to be remembered.
Yeah, I feel much more.
Long answer there. Sorry.
No, good answer. Good answer. I feel much more upbeat today than I did yesterday. I watched some videos of, is it Roma fans and West Ham fans and Olympiacos fans celebrating the Conference League, and if that could be us, that would be fantastic.
West Ham said it was like something they'll never ever forget. You know, the supporters, David Moyes. I mean, it's a trophy, isn't it? It's something that Forest have to go all out to win next season, without a doubt. And it's just going to be the balancing act, isn't it, of the league?
Yeah, we'll come on to that. Why do you think that coverage is generally negative? Is it because we're a noisy club and that stems from the owner more than anything?
Yeah, I think it's all down to that, isn't it? I mean, obviously recently with the owners, what happened after the Leicester game, that's just been cranked up again. But if you remember that first season, everyone was sort of saying, great to see Forest back. But then when they started signing some players, it was all like, can't allow that. You know, this what's going on here. And I just, once again, as a Midlands reporter, I do it the same with Leicester, Wolves and Villa. I just think the Big Six bias, it really does depress me. And I just think it's been even more pronounced this season. I think there is just an element of that get back in your box sort of thing sometimes with Forest. And yeah, they are a noisy club. There's always something going on. And I just think that cranks it up a little bit. Off my soapbox. I want to be positive.
Looking back for a little bit on Sunday then, and it probably leads into the conversations about what needs to do with the squad. You mentioned they look knackered. There was times where, they just looked like they didn't even, unless it was smash it as hard as you can and see what happens. Did that last second half really sum up the last 6 weeks of the season for you?
Yeah, I think so. They just looked like they were running on empty, didn't they? And obviously, Chris Wood's been an absolute revelation, but I think he takes one of those 2 chances, doesn't he, earlier in the season? And we can't be critical. To score 20 goals in the Premier League for any striker is an unbelievable achievement. But, he's been playing so many games as well. He's not had a rest. And whether that goes back to them not bringing a striker in January to cover him and replace him. And, the Taiwo injury was really badly timed as well. I mean, I know he's struggled a bit this season, but in that Chelsea game, I think he'd have been ideal to bring on just for that little bit of chaos that he brings, just to cause a bit of unpredictability, really, because it was just looking too obvious, wasn't it? Like you say, hitting it long, trying to get those crosses in, and Chelsea defenders, well, you have to say they were very defensively resilient. So I just think the big thing this summer is they need to find players that give them a different way of playing, because when it's effective, it's brilliant. But I just think there needs, not the plan B, but I just think there needs to be some real difference makers on the field that can either be brought on from the bench or start.
Yeah, I think there is a plan B. I just don't think we've got the players to execute it yet.
No,
I said this on Monday's podcast. We can't defend corners, so we sign Milenkovic. If we need more creativity, then the owner's going to go out and sign players, isn't he? I guess it's going to be a busy summer. Just before we get to that, I want to ask you, how was Nuno on Sunday? You said he was, pretty ghostly figure last season. It was a rough end this season. What were his emotions in the press conference?
He looked absolutely knackered, and we actually said that. Just said you need a break. I mean, I think he said at the end of last season he's going to celebrate with a few beers. I think he was so tired he would have struggled to hold the bottle of Madri this time. It was he just looked exhausted. The season's obviously taken its toll in the last few weeks. He needed to obviously focus on the fact that it was a celebration, still a great achievement, but there was definitely that nagging sense of it was in our hands. Will we ever have a better chance? Which I guess is what many supporters feel as well. It was just the same thing. Was that in our hands? And we've thrown it away a little bit. And I think Nuno tried to get away from that, but he knew there was a bit of a sense of disappointment, obviously, despite the 7th finishing great achievement.
Are you surprised by how well he's done? Obviously, you look up at him at Wolves when he did finish 7th twice in a row. I must admit, I didn't think he'd do this well. How have you been shocked by it or not?
I think, he's manager of the year for me. I mean, you can go to Slot winning the league, and even going to Emery and Pereira at Wolves, but I think Nuno's been fantastic just because of what the 2 seasons before. I mean, there was last game of the season and the penultimate game of the season, I think, wasn't it? Going into those games thinking Forest could still go down. And they've been in the top 3 from, December the 19th to April the 19th, something like that. That's nearly 4 months. And that obviously comes into the sense of disappointment at finishing 7th, I suppose. But that's still a remarkable achievement. All the wins, the double over Tottenham, the double over Man United, the win over Man City, the win over, even the West Ham win. I thought the response there was fantastic at that stage of the season. It's just a shame they couldn't repeat it in the other games. I think the Leicester one's the one they will always look back on as the one that's killed them, haven't they? I mean, if they'd taken 3 points from that, or even held on against Everton, it could have been altogether different, and it's an even more positive season. But on the whole, it's just been incredible, and the managers of other clubs have rightly highlighted Nuno for the job he's done.
It was weird then to see last week some reports saying, Roma, Saudi Arabia, a French journalist who's been writing about stuff previously saying he might go. I saw a piece that you wrote saying that, he's staying and Marinakis is going to back him then. Is that right?
Well, there was a quote at the end of the game from Nuno to TV, I think, where he said, "Now's not the time to talk about it." And I think the way Nuno does sometimes say things is it can be misinterpreted. And I think what he basically meant was exactly what it was, really. Now's not the time. We've just finished the season. Let's just have this celebration. But I think he had talks with Marinakis after the game on Sunday, and it was made very clear to us that he is Marinakis' man. He's the one. He wants him to take them forward. I think the new contract will be a formality. With a year left, that is something that I think they'll sort out quite quickly. I think they will have tried to sort it out earlier in the year, but Nuno, being Nuno, just said no distractions, let's just get on. But in many ways, Marinakis and Nuno, they've got a very good relationship, because obviously everyone thinks of Marinakis as this combustible figure, and Nuno's like this really peaceful Zen figure. And I think they really balance off each other quite well, and it's a relationship that does work. They really talk for hours sometimes after games. I mean, I've heard it sometimes goes into the early hours after 3 o'clock kickoffs. They're talking there for hours, so they have got that relationship. The only thing is Nuno has, I think my colleague Tom Colomossi said last week, Nuno has this reputation for not staying at places for a long time. So maybe there is that element of people trying to get him out of there, maybe not himself. Maybe that's created the uncertainty. But I think Nuno will want to build for next season and build the squad and prepare for a European campaign and balancing the Thursday Sundays, which is going to be the big challenge.
So from your reporting, I read the piece you did about how it all came together. We know it kind of did fall away at the end. I don't know if you had a chance to speak to people yet, but what's been the internal reaction to not making the Champions League?
I mean, obviously there is a financial element to it, where the players they will target this summer may be out of reach now that they finish in the Conference League, and obviously that'll come into it with players that may go as well. But in terms of the targets, I don't think there's any real difference. I think Champions League, Europa League, Conference League, all the targets would have been the same ones they were looking to attain. I think the Conference League is worth about 10 million, isn't it, compared to the obvious riches, 80 million, so the Champions League. So there is that difference. But it's like many supporters have said, the Conference League, it's a great little building block to start. Champions League, you never know. It could have been an absolute nightmare. It could have been too ahead of schedule for them. Europa League or Conference League gives them a real chance to compete and have a real chance of going deep in the competition, I think.
Was the Conference League a positive for Villa a couple of years ago? Do you think then,
they just viewed it as another avenue to win a trophy for Emery? I mean, they got to a semi-final, loss to Olympiacos, and there was never any sense of this is like the wooden spoon sort of thing. I think there was a real, they embraced the competition, the fans loved it, and I'm sure that'll be the same with the Forest fans as well. There's still some big clubs in there, and also some tiny ones that are good holiday destinations. So let's be positive about that as well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward. I'm dreaming of a Fiorentina Forest final. I think that's probably what the
Milenkovic derby. Yeah, bring it on.
Yeah, exactly. Just before we go to a break, one question about now we're not in the Champions League. Olympiacos there were board changes. Mr. Marinakis relinquished effective control. I'm sure there's all these dotting I's and crossing T's that are ticking your way for boxes. Can those boxes be unticked now, or will it be back to normal?
I think his shares obviously went into the blind trust, didn't they? And I think that, from what I can hear, that is likely to be reversed. But Forest are also at pains to say that Marinakis was never on the Forest board. It was just sort of like he's the owner. It's very complicated, but he was never on the board. But I think the blind trust shares can be reversed. So it's any sort of questions over his involvement that will be ended, obviously, because they're in different competitions. I think that will happen.
What about the directors? They changed all the board. Will that go back, or do you not know that yet?
I'm not so sure on that, but I assume it will probably go back to how it was before.
Yeah, I'm sure. Right, looking forward to talking more about what's coming up. Just before that, though, what's coming up about the Trent Navigation? 14th of June, Sex Pistols Expose, daytime gig, 3 p.m. till 8 p.m. Scan the QR code if you're watching this on YouTube, or go to fatsoma.com. Should be a good gig. Is that up your musical street, John Percy, or not?
Not so much, I'm afraid. No. Big music fan, but that's not my vibe.
What is your vibe?
Oh God, how long you got? I'm a bit of a vinyl collector. Not as much now, not as much as I used to be, but now I'm into. I grew up at a brilliant time. I'm 49, so sort of late 80s, early 90s was a great time for music. House, hip hop, funk. There's some great clubs in Nottingham, and it was a great time to go out into town and hear great music. So I've sort of carried on that, and it's quite funny actually, because my daughter's 15. She's on TikTok all the time, and all these songs that we were hearing when we used to go out are now being sort of like revisited. So it's a really interesting time for music at the moment. But yeah, sorry, no, that's not my thing. But I love music, so I would never criticize anyone for liking any different genres.
You should talk to Prutz. I think he's a vinyl collector as
Yes,
well.
he is. He is. He loves
Yeah.
it, doesn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. I think he is more Sex Pistols. Certainly.
I wouldn't tell Stuart Pearce that, by the way.
No, certainly not. Certainly not. I wouldn't want to float him about that.
No.
Let's talk about a few players then. I mean, Gibbs-White's probably the main one. So much consensus, it feels like he's going. Is that your read of it or not?
I think it is. Yeah, I think there is a feeling at the club that if he's still there next season, it will be a surprise. I think for all Forest growth and all the progress they've made, sadly, it's a state of football that if Man City come in for you, you're going to go. It's that lure of playing for one of the big heavyweight clubs, and I think there is a sense that Morgan's been a brilliant player for Forest. There's no doubt. You know, there's no rewriting of history here, but maybe he's done his time. His journey is over with Forest. Maybe 3 years. You know, he's made the impression, got them stabilised. Now giving them that chance. Maybe the naive part of me thought if Champions League that gives them a chance of staying. But I think if Man City come in for you, which does appear likely, I think there's a chance he will go. Yeah.
It was slightly noticeable at the end on Sunday. He did wave to the crowd on his own away from the group before they went off, and then they came back on with the family. And it was great to see as well with all the kids and his kids as well. But yeah, I got that sense. I mean, the general transfer plan, it feels like actually I don't want him to go, but in a sense, he's 25. He's got 2 years left on his contract. If he's not going to sign a new contract, then this is probably the way Forest have to do business, isn't it, to stabilise themselves?
It's the club model, isn't it? I mean, whether we can debate the financial rules, but that is the model for clubs of Forest size, isn't it? You know, Wolves have done it. But the fans don't like it, but Wolves have done it for years. You know, sold their best players, got them at a certain price, then sold them on for profit. There's nothing to be afraid of in that. I think Villa will obviously do the same this summer as well. Brentford are going to do it. Maybe we could nick one of them as well. But I think that is the model. You buy a player for 25 million, sell him for 70, 80. That is football business, isn't it? And it's a way to progress and make the club sustainable. Murillo's the other one. I think, you know, we talk about Murillo. I think he's more likely to stay than Morgan, but that could be a factor with the Champions League missing out on it, so to speak. You know, there could be the Champions League could be a big lure for Murillo, but the sound is from the inside the club on him that they want him to give another year and then add another 10, 20 million onto his transfer value.
Yeah, you don't want to sell too many, do you? That's my worry. If you sell 3 or 4, you know, someone comes in from Alenkovic who see how good he is and all that. So, yeah, I hope they resist that. One other player I wanted to ask you about, who's flavour of the month, who we can't go an episode without talking about. And if you say a word against him, some people get really angry. And if you, if you...
Sangare.
Yes.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, no, I tell you, the way he was in pre-season, the way he's finished the season was exactly the player Forest thought they were going to sign. But he's obviously had such bad luck, hasn't he? He had the injury, obviously, first game of the season. The AFCON last year when he came back, lost about 3 kilograms, I think, which, you know, is that for a footballer, like that must be a nightmare. But I just think for Europe next season, I think he'll be absolutely ideal. The pace of the game, the experience. Saw him a couple of times for PSV against Leicester when they were in Europe, and he absolutely ran the show. He's a fantastic player. The club are so happy with him as well, and I think they really, really want him to come good, which I think, you know, he's shown in the last games. I mean, I thought he was unlucky to come off against Chelsea. Maybe they lost a bit of momentum and control when he went off in the second half. But I think he'll be an absolutely pivotal player next season, and the one that they've always hoped they were going to be signing.
That was what I was going to ask you about, how they see him internally, because I don't know if you listened to yesterday's podcast with Kelvin, and I thought Sangare was our best player by a mile, but the ex-pros that we have on still have reservations about him off the ball and things like that.
Pace. The pace.
Pace.
I think that, but I think he's looked far fitter is probably the wrong word, but I think he's looked far more like he's come to terms with it in these last few games. I think he was quite noticeable, particularly last season, that he did look like he was off the pace a little bit, but I think he's caught up with that. With another good pre-season, I think the club have got very high hopes for him.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear, because Chelsea I thought was his best game up against Caicedo, and Palmer and players like that. I thought Palmer might make a bit of, really test him, and he kept him very quiet. He's gone very quiet at the end of the season. So no, that was really good to see, certainly. You did an article, really interesting one, if people haven't checked it out, about players that we're looking at. I loved all the names, Delap, Fernandes, McAtee, Truffert, who I don't know really anything about, if I'm honest, but I just wanted to ask you a little bit about a few of them because time's moved on a little bit. Delap, it feels like everyone's after him. He's got a very busy agent by the sound of it who wants him to speak to every single club, which is fair enough. But
I think that's probably him as well, to be honest. I think he's a player who likes to see what clubs have got to say. I think last season he was very, very close to joining Southampton, but then met Kieran McKenna, and that just changed the whole thing. So he is very much a player who's, he can have his head turned by what clubs say to him. So I think Forest are hopeful of speaking to him. It does sound like the direction of travel is either Man United or Chelsea now. But personal opinion, I think he'd be absolutely fantastic for Forest. I think the way he plays, the game and style Nuno plays, are sort of obviously Chris Wood, sort of whether he replaces him, whether he competes with him, whether they play together. I think it'd be an ideal move for him. But it's just like we're going back to Morgan. Chelsea's and Man United's, they're going to be the ones that he really probably goes and ends up at.
Yeah, I hope he looks at us and thinks, actually, 2 years at Forest, and then I can go to one of these mega clubs, as you say, and be a star there. A season learning alongside Chris Wood and doing what Chris Wood can't, because he's so athletic and powerful. I think he's great in a bad team. So I'd love us to sign him. I'm not sure we will.
No.
With McAtee. Is there a chance for a funky PSR deal there, like we did with Elliot Anderson, potentially? Do you think?
That's got me. Yeah, that's good point actually. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that'll be discussed if it comes up. I mean, McAtee's got interest from like a lot of these players. McAtee's coveted by a lot of other clubs. Forest have looked at him for quite a long time. I think it goes back to that succession planning of if Morgan ever was to leave, McAtee would be a very good sort of replacement. So there's been that interest for a good 12, 18 months, I think. Whether it sort of like goes as some sort of joint deal. Clubs, they're not so keen on these joint deals, I don't think now. I don't know whether it's some sort of financial thing, but they do like to do them separately now. I look back to when Tottenham signed James Maddison and Harry Winks went to Leicester. That was sort of, they were at pains to make out as a separate deal. So I don't know if that works out the same. But yeah, McAtee's been on there a while. Fernandes is another one. I think they looked at Fernandes in January actually as a potential. He'll have a lot of interest. Apparently Southampton are asking ridiculous money for players, so they're not very easy to deal with at the moment, which is obviously what does happen at clubs when they've just been relegated. There's a very sort of stubborn stance that they adopt. Truffert is another brilliant player who will have a lot of competition. He's very like Andy Robertson. He's very much a player who gets up and down the pitch. I think there's been Leif Davis at Ipswich, another one who they've been linked with, I think. I think they'll need two left-backs, to be honest. I think Toffolo most likely will go. Moreno's obviously going to go back to Villa. So two left-backs and a load of wingers, I think, is probably going to be on the radar.
It's interesting. I really like us signing all these young players. Do you think there's probably going to be some experience on the short list as well? We are going to be a bit youthful. We don't have Milenkovic, Wood. It's probably about it. Of actually players over 25 or 30, and Matt Sells in the starting 11 all the time. Do you think we might go for a bit of experience, especially with Europe coming?
Yeah, they'll definitely go for experience. But the main strategy is now to sign players in their early 20s, as we've said with Morgan, to increase their value and high potential, room to improve, and then hopefully sell them on for a profit. That that's just the way the rules are now. That's how we have to operate.
Just lastly on Forest transfers, other outgoings, I suppose, obviously like Willy Boly, Matt Turner, Emmanuel Dennis, the players we'll never get rid of. Well, I love Willy Boly, but the other two we're going to struggle. But what about players like Jota, Sosa? Is there potential for movement on that front, do you think?
Definitely, yeah. I think those two will, if they can find buyers, those two will go. I think. Look, they've been okay, haven't they? But I think Nuno's looking for a bit more impact off the bench. I think obviously Hudson-Odoi and Ilanga are the first choice, but I don't feel like those two have really pushed them enough. But maybe that's me being harsh, but I think Nuno will look for at least two players that can really come on, maybe even start as a real impact player. Boly might have a chance of actually staying for another year. Actually, I think he's very good off the field. He's like the unofficial club translator. He's very close with the manager as well, obviously going back to Wolves. So there is a chance he could stay. Turner, Dennis. Yeah, there's quite a few. I mean, there's O'Brien, isn't there? There's quite a few players they could get rid of. So there will be a lot of space. Just a word on Toffolo, by the way. He'll have the pick of every Championship club going, and probably even Premier League clubs. He'll be an absolutely brilliant free transfer, brilliant football man, brilliant human being. I wish him all the best.
I love him. He came on here and he's such a nice guy. Loads of respect for him. What will they do with Zach Abbott now we're in Europe and we need players for Conference League squads? Will they loan him out still or not?
I think he's got a good chance of staying. The club think ever so highly of him. He went on pre-season last summer. Joe Worrell was sort of the mentor figure to him, sort of looking after him, chaperoning him, and he didn't put a foot wrong in that semi-final, did he? In a very sort of difficult game to throw him in. The homegrown element is obviously going to be a factor because they're not very strong on that. With I think it's only Zach and Ryan Yates, isn't it, at the moment?
Yeah.
So that will be a factor. And with the greatest respect to him, Conference League standards a little bit lower, so I think that will be a great grounding for him to gain more experience. Tyler Binden's another one. I mean, he ripped it up for Reading apparently, one of the League One Players of the Year. Whether he comes back or has a chance, or whether they loan him out, but whether he has a chance in Europe as well remains to be seen.
Exciting summer ahead, though, isn't it? Whatever happens, it feels like we're in a good place as a football club. I know financially as well. It feels like we're in a better spot with PSR. Not tons of. It's not a bottomless pit at all. But with smart dealings, it feels like the club's in the best place it's been in for. God, I mean, as long as I can remember.
Well, yeah, we saw Yatesy last week, a few of us, and he was reminding us about what we're going through at the moment. It's a lot better than losing to Middlesbrough at home and being bottom of the league, just before Steve Cooper came in. And that is the way to look at it. I mean, it's even like going back to 5 years of the struggles in the Championship, even going back to League One. I mean, I've got mates who are season ticket holders, and you ring them on a Saturday and they'd just be so annoyed and so frustrated with Forest not going anywhere. And now, there's people moaning about finishing 7th in the Premier League. I mean, we've just got to remember where this club's come from.
Just before I ask John a little bit about Villa and Wolves and Leicester, just out of curiosity, see what he's making of them. A quick word for Vesta Blinds. If you're looking for new blinds or shutters made to measure in the East Midlands or Notts in particular, do check out the link in the description, vestablinds.com, and the phone number's on screen and the email as well if you're watching on YouTube. There we go. Lovely stuff. John's got a very well lit room here. I can see he's got the shutters, I imagine. Let's talk just quickly. Villa, if I've read so much stuff that they really need to get in the Champions League, they've missed out in a lot of controversy. I haven't seen it because I haven't bought myself to watch much football. But are they? Is it a bit of a panic there now financially, or are they going to be all right?
I think the club think they're going to be all right, but they also acknowledge it's going to be a very challenging summer. I think, regardless of the June 30th PSR deadline, I think they're still going to have to sell at least one, maybe two, maybe even three players that they probably would want to comply. But the noises are that they still will look to bring in players. It's more about they can't spend as much as they wanted to. So that's going to be the issue for them. I mean, obviously Rashford's out of reach now, and Asensio maybe as well. Martinez will probably go. I mean, there's no way you leave the pitch in the last home game in tears when you've not either had the knock on the door to say we need to sell you, or you've been told you're surplus. So there's him. I think Jacob Ramsey will probably go. He's got a lot of clubs in for him. Ollie Watkins, I think they'll struggle to find a buyer for the price they want because of his age. But that's going to be an uncomfortable summer, which the club acknowledge. They know it's going to be a balancing act. Yeah,
Jacob Ramsey's one I would love for us to try for, but probably out of our reach as well. Good young player. What about Wolves? I've said referenced on here. I've got a lot of Wolves mates. Pereira went in and did an incredible job. It feels like with Wolves, they have a terrible first half of the season, bring someone in, all looks rosy, and then they realise in the next season, actually, we really should have signed some players. So what do you think is going to happen there?
It was just exactly like Lopetegui, if you remember that, when Lopetegui went in sort of November time and saved the season with a good January window. It's just been the same with Pereira, but they're another club that make no bones about it. They are trying to be self-sustainable, and they're not going to spend much money this summer. It's going to be all money that they've generated from sales, and obviously Cooney is going to go most likely to Man United. Ainori, they wanted to sign a new contract, but there's going to be clubs interested in him. I mean, they've even got other players like João Gomez, who, you know, there's a lot of clubs like him already. They can't sell everyone, can they? That's the problem they've got, and the fans are just a bit frustrated. Well, very frustrated with the ownership there, because the self-sustainability involves the model of selling players, which they probably, I mean, that one year they sold about 150 million pounds worth of players in. It was, I do feel for Gary O'Neill on that, because he was left with a really unbalanced squad without the star players. So they're going to have to be careful how they do that. If they're not going to bring in many new recruits, they're going to be careful on how they sell people.
Do you think it's going to be next season maybe one where one of the kind of 17 more established club goes? There's lots of noise about Leeds actually kind of spend some cash, and Burnley look like they've got some foundations to have a proper crack at it. Do you think someone might go next year?
Do you mean getting relegated or go?
Yeah, one of the 17 clubs that, you know, stayed up comfortably the last couple of years, is one of them going to be in trouble? Yeah,
I think so, because my another argument I've always had is that the argument about the 3 teams going down, I just think they recruited badly. I mean, I think it's all very easy to say there is a gulf, and there obviously is. I think Middlesbrough finished something like 30 points behind Leeds in the Championship, so there is even a gulf within the Championship. But I think Southampton, Leicester, and Ipswich didn't recruit very well, and that's one of the main reasons why they've got relegated. It's obviously a massive step up, but it's all about getting your signings right. And I think Forest, particularly in the last 2 years, have done that. Fulham have done it. Bournemouth have done it. You know, these clubs, it's not just the gulf is there, but I think it's about preparing properly and signing the right players.
Lastly, we should finish on Leicester for a bit of, a bit of misery that Forest fans might enjoy. I live in a village near Leicester. Fans are miserable. It doesn't sound like a very happy club at all. Points deduction talk again. Are you expecting a pretty ropey season in the Championship, or do you think they might bounce back?
It's impossible to predict, isn't it? Because if they do get this points deduction, it's going to obviously set them back massively. It's when it comes as well, whether it's, I can't see it being at the start of the season. I think it will just get lawyered and legal so much that it could be, you know, end of the year at the very earliest. They've obviously got players, not that many players they could sell this time. Last time they were relegated, they could. They'll probably sell the goalkeeper and a couple of others that they don't want to, but there's not the sort of James Maddison, Harvey Barnes, Yuri Tielemans, you know, that they can get rid of this time. So it's all about who they appoint as well, whether Van Nistelrooy goes, which I think he will. There's already opposition to Russell Martin. So, like you say, it's a very unhappy club at the moment. And myself personally, I just think the people who own the club need to look at themselves. It's just been an absolute shambles.
Certainly has. Right, we shall leave it there. If you've enjoyed this, do us a favour, hit like, hit subscribe. Do consider membership or Patreon. We get early access to things like this, any pre-recording to you with guests like, consider that, or just give us a lovely 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. I do enjoy reading all of those. You can follow John at J Percy Telegraph on Twitter. Try not to abuse him, but I'm sure he'd appreciate that. Anything you want to plug, John, work-wise, before we let you go?
Well, yeah, obviously, please read my work and subscribe. But also, Matt, I just want to say before we leave, well done this season. I think you've been a brilliant host. Everyone's enjoyed the podcast. It's been a very balanced, enjoyable watch. And I think, well done. I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of the Forest fans.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm not very good receiving praise. I'll just say thank you. No, no, I wasn't, but thank you.
No, it's been great. It's been great. I think through all the highs and lows, I think, you know, I've watched a few of them, and it's always been it's always been a very balanced, fair, sensible sort of podcast to watch, even with Gary Birtles on.
Even with Gary, yeah. I need to get Gary back on. But in fact, Gary might be on later this week. We'll certainly be back tomorrow with sort of end of season awards and a few thoughts with a few of the regulars. Then we'll do a bit of an expert verdict with Lewis and maybe Gary, if I can track him down later in the week. And then we'll plough on relentlessly with transfer stuff, as I'm sure John will. Right. Thanks very much for everyone for their time. Thanks very much for John, certainly. Like I say, if we don't see you tomorrow, we shall see you soon.